Hello. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you especially to my wonderful colleagues from the Horn of Africa, who I will introduce soon. We are so thrilled to have you all here. I was just glancing through all the people that have joined, and we have many of my teammates from Alight from around the world, many friends who are old to Alight who have been our supporters and collaborators for years or decades, and some of you who I think are newer to us. So I thought it would be helpful just to share a little bit about what Alight is all about. To get started, I'm Jocelyn Wyatt. I am the CEO of Alight. We are an organization of about 3,000 humanitarian workers serving in 21 countries around the world. What we do every day is to walk alongside those who, by sheer luck and circumstance, have ended up on the long and arduous journey of displacement. At Alight, we offer services and we co-design solutions with the displaced across key experiences of their displacement, helping them create the peace and safety of home, pursue dignified lives, find strength through connection to one another and beyond. And particularly relevant to today's conversation, we provide life-saving care for mind, body, and spirit. So currently today, there are 40 million people in East Africa who are food insecure. This means that they don't have the physical, social, and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food. And 10 million children today are acutely malnourished. So there are a variety of local and global forces at play that are contributing to this emergency situation. The last couple of years have seen failed harvests. You may have remember last year we saw many news stories about locust infestations in Kenya in particular. We know that there are active armed conflicts and political instability in many of the countries on this map. And this has sent prices for food produced domestically skyrocketing. At the same time, cereal prices have increased sharply as a result of global supply chain challenges related to the pandemic. COVID-19 has disrupted global supply chains around the world. The war in Ukraine has really cut off shipments of grain and cereals from Ukraine, which has really been a breadbasket for the world. And of course, global inflation, which we see in the US, but are also seeing around the world, has increased fuel prices, fertilizer prices, other inputs, and the costs of goods overall for people. But perhaps the biggest factor in current food insecurity is the ongoing drought and successive failed rainy seasons. We've had 4 failed rains in this part of Eastern and Central Africa, and this massive drought is what is really putting the region on the doorstep of famine. So the result is that we've seen millions of livestock are dead, farmers and pastoralists are displaced from their communities, and there's massive food insecurity across the region. Alight is responding in 6 countries in East Africa. We are working in Sudan, South Sudan, Ethiopia, Uganda, Kenya, and the entire Somali Peninsula. We are providing life-saving care through emergency nutrition and medical support. We have 27 health and nutrition centers across Somalia and Somaliland alone. We're the largest healthcare provider in the country of Sudan, where we're providing therapeutic feeding and nutrition support for malnourished children under 5, pregnant and nursing mothers. We're also providing urgently needed monthly food relief to thousands of families, providing bags of flour, rice, sugar, salt, dates to supplement what food they can gather, and ensuring that through water trucking or maintenance and rehabilitation of water sources, the people have enough safe water to live. We're also partnering with faith and community partners to broaden our efforts and to scale our impact. Last week, I was fortunate to have the opportunity to visit Alight's teams in Ethiopia and in Hargeisa in Somaliland. The Horn of Africa is really at the epicenter of this crisis. The UN recently warned at the beginning of last week that famine is at the doorstep of Somalia, and many expect a declaration in several districts any day. You can see the red shows where we're at emergency levels of food insecurity, and you can see this shift just between what we've experienced in last month and this month in August, and what we expect to see through the end of this year. So the red indicates that emergency level food insecurity, but you can see really how this famine is growing and extending through the rest of this year. So I visited Ethiopia and Somaliland so that I could hear directly from our team on the ground, so I could talk with women and families who've been recently displaced due to this drought, to understand their biggest needs and concerns, and to meet with the government officials and community partners who we can join together with in coming up with solutions. One woman I met was named Asha. She's 95 years old. She had just recently walked for 6 days from her home in eastern Somaliland to reach the Dagali camp for displaced people. Since the drought began, she lost 300 of her goats and sheep and was left with only one goat. She was so thankful for the community in Dagali who had welcomed her in as a sister and had allowed her to stay in their home and shared their food with her as she was trying to figure out how she was going to settle there. Another woman that I met was named Ayan. She was a mother of 3. When I asked her how she had decided to leave home and come to the displaced persons camp, she said, "I couldn't feed my kids. I didn't have a choice. It was either death or life." She had landed here, again, was sharing space and housing with the local displaced community members who had been displaced through the previous drought, and was trying to figure out how she might be able to get a livelihood, make some money, and support her family. Many other mothers told me that where they came from, there wasn't even a cup of water, never mind any food. They're looking for a future now. They're wanting a house. They're wanting someplace to settle and to feel at home. They're wanting ways so that they can make money and provide for and support their families, can ensure that their children get a good education, they have access to healthcare, and that they can move on to the next chapter of their lives. So we're today at an inflection point. Famine is at the doorstep in the Horn of Africa, but there's still the opportunity to turn it away. With global support, we could both provide the emergency life-saving support that's needed, but also really protect this region from falling further into famine this year and in future years. We need to get families what they need and manage the current crisis and also build resilience for the future. So I'm really pleased to be able to introduce several members from Alight's Horn of Africa team who are working on behalf of families like Asha's and Ayan's. We have today Abdi Noor, who is Alight's Deputy Director for Somalia. We have Decca, who is Alight's HR Coordinator for the Horn of Africa team, and she was with me throughout my visit last week. We have Ismahan, who is Alight's Health and Nutrition Manager for the Horn of Africa based in Mogadishu. And we have Mohammed, who is Alight's Protection Coordinator for the Horn of Africa and recently led a mission to the Mandera Triangle, which we will hear more about. So before we start this conversation with this amazing team, I just wanted to let you all know that there will be opportunities for you all to have your questions answered. We just request that you put any questions in the Zoom chat, and I will address those questions to our speakers in the end of our time together in this call today. So I am going to start with Decca. Can you just give us a sense of the severity of the situation from a historical perspective? We've heard about famine in Somalia and in Ethiopia and the Horn of Africa for our whole lives. How is this one different?
Thank you, Jocelyn, and hi, everyone. You know, like you said, famine is not new to Somalia or the Horn of Africa. And they said every 5 years, 2 years is going to be affected by drought or famine. So it's something that has been coming back and forth. But they said this is the worst drought we had in 40 years. And when they said 40 years, the last one we had was 1974, 75. Some of us were not born, but we were grown up. I remember my mom telling us whenever we left some food on my plate, oh, you haven't seen the, apartheid over there, you better finish your food. It means that was the worst famine that has came to Somalia. And this is the reason it was different back then. Was Somalia was a government. It has, the previous Siad Barre government was in place. The government, what they have done is with alliance Soviet Union, they have sent the military vehicles and helicopters, and the families were relocated. The areas that was affected was mostly eastern, now Somaliland, eastern regions, and the government has done an emergency response where they have taken the families and relocate to Somalia, lower Shabelle, or near the coastal area or the Famine area. So the government had the capacity. It was a huge, one of the biggest African government. But now we don't have that kind of government in place. We don't have the capacity to do that. And secondly, you have to know, we had another famine in 2015 and 2017, which affected again in the Horn of Africa. And we were just recovering from that when the COVID came. And we had the COVID in 2019. And, Somalis are a community. Let's say when we are talking in Somalis, we have a percentage of us living in the nomad areas, and all of us have some families back in that area. So what happens is when we get remittance from abroad and it comes into Somalia, some of that remittance used to go to the nomad to support them whenever there's upcoming famine or drought. But when you had the COVID, it completely cut that chain. Because of the lack of jobs. And then now we have the inflation of prices. So it's affecting people within the city, and it doesn't have the capability. People don't have the means to support people in the nomad area. So because of this chain of events that has taken place from 2017, we haven't recovered from the one we had in 2015, 2017. And this is why it's worse, because of the COVID, because of the inflation, because of the war in Ukraine. It's becoming too many things at one time happening now. So it's affecting the entire Horn of Africa. When it's affecting the rest of the world, but it's affecting more in the Horn of Africa because there's no assistance, their remittance has been cut down. The government doesn't have the capability to support, whether it's in Somalia, in Somaliland, they don't have the means. And that's why this is completely, it's more difficult than before. And people are, the lady Asha, that's why she said she went through the drought in 74, and this is worse. Why? Because back then they had the government to support on, emergency, I think African Union and the European Union, the Soviet Union. So there was support from outside as well as the inside from the government.
Yeah, thank you, Decca. Yeah, I agree. I heard the same thing when we were speaking with people there, which is that it's both that the drought and the famine is, as bad as it's been, but also, like you said, there's just not the safety net that has existed in the past, both from relatives that previously were able to send remittances and now are not in a financial position to do so, both because of the pandemic that has certainly economically affected people. Also, the major fire that destroyed the largest market in Hargeisa also meant that many people in Somaliland lost their livelihoods due to that several months ago. And so that's also meant that there isn't sort of this level of family support in combination with just not seeing the outpouring of development aid yet or government support to families. So I think we're missing that safety net, which is making things challenging. I think for me, the famine that really sticks out in my mind was the 1984 famine in Ethiopia that got a lot of press in the US. And I think for many people of my generation was just such a memorable humanitarian crisis to really see, the starving children. And I think there at that time in 1984, such an outpouring of global support. The We Are the World song was around that time. And so, I think we're, if we're able to see the world come together in support of the Horn of Africa as it did in 1984, I think that would be tremendous. Abdi Noor, there are 7.8 million people on the Somali Peninsula who have been affected by the drought. Can you tell us about them? How do they live? How are they affected? And who is Alight most concerned about?
Yeah, thank you so much, Jocelyn. I think as yourself and Decca has also touched a bit of, I think Somalia is on the verge of famine. And this as a result of 4 consecutive failed rainy seasons. And the fifth season is also projected to fail as well. This now will bring now the situation into a very difficult position. As we just said, it is estimated about 7.8 million people are actually severely affected by the drought. Two of the districts within Somalia have already at the highest level, the emergency level, that's been declared famine due to the level of the situation, due to the deaths. The drought has really affected two main groups. That is the pastoralists, whose main survival is their herds and livestock, and their livestock actually are dying at a shocking rate. The other group is the farmers, actually, whose crops and whose farms are dried up due to lack of water, lack of irrigation, and lack of support from the government and international partners as well. This now situation, of course, now the drought, the severe drought, and the lack of the death of the animals, livestock, and the poor and produce from the farms have led now to over 1 million people to get displaced, to flee from their homes to the major cities, and they live in IDP camps at the moment. In the major cities of Mogadishu, Baidoa, Kismayo, Hargeisa, Garowe, all those major cities now are hosting larger number of IDPs, and they have been kept in IDP camps. Within those IDP camps now, and majority of the people who are now fleeing, now going to those IDP camps are women and girls, and they have enormous, protection risks in these camps. This includes a lack of water, lack of food, lack of shelter, lack of health and nutrition, basic health services, and they are lacking all these basic services in these IDP camps. Over 1.5 million children actually are now facing acute malnutrition. Already, as we speak, over 730 children have confirmed to have died out of malnutrition. But these numbers could be more because many of these deaths actually go unreported. So we are expecting more deaths, especially on the children. Mothers who are both lactating and pregnant women actually are the most vulnerable as well because of lack of food. They are hungry. The mother is lactating or she's pregnant. Now already she's acutely malnourished. Now that's dangers her health and the health of the children and the babies they are really taking care of. So these are the groups who are severely affected by the drought. Children are out of school. Over 2.4 million is been projected to be affected. School-going children. Already around 1.2 million children are already out of school as we speak because they have fled with their mothers and fathers back to in IDP camps. They have left their homes. They have left their schools. Now they're out of school. And that is the situation when we talk about the drought, and that is actually how people are. All these IDPs are living in those IDP camps. They are missing, they're lacking shelter because apparently due to, of course, the lack of funding and there's a low funding at the moment. Partners have really scaled down the support that the humanitarian support that's been given. So because of all these issues at hand, now either people are now the death is becoming so many, and it's going unreported, and we're expecting more deaths and to come. And if the situation is not really situation is being international partners are not coming in to support more and give more, scale up the humanitarian support, then the situation will be more difficult and the situation will be more worse.
Thank you. Yeah, so it's that, Alight's focus is really on supporting people that are displaced or have experienced displacement. And as you mentioned, the groups that are significantly displaced in this crisis are pastoralists and farmers who have lost their livelihoods and are unable to make a living in the way that they have before. But the children in particular are so deeply affected by this displacement through both protection risks and through not being able to go to school, but also just through having their lives so disruptive and not having that stable sense of home that they so deserve. Mohammed, I had mentioned that the UN had said that famine is at the door. What does famine actually mean in human terms? What's the difference between experiencing a drought and being in a famine?
Thank you so much, Jocelyn. As Abdinur and Rebecca mentioned, that the previous famine, actually in the previous years, it was like the community had got some recovery, the community had got some strength within themselves to support. But this one, it is solely touching all the areas because most of the communities in the Horn of Africa is facing the threat of starvation due to the failed 4 consecutive rainy seasons in all of East Africa, especially in Ethiopia, parts of Kenya and Somalia. So this climatic event not seen in the past 40 years, as they are saying, so this is really distracting the way of living, and it is really increasing the displacement within the community. And as Abdul said, this has really affected majority of the livestock, as mostly 75% of Somalis are pastoralists, and over 7 million livestock, which the pastoralist community and even the other community was depending for living, have died and passed away. Therefore, the sustenance of life for these people is now is moved within to IDP centers. So this is overall affecting the severe drought, as scholars said, really a widespread deficit of water and pasture, really contributing to decline of people's living, livestock body conditions, increase the rate of disease outbreaks, which is also raising the mortalities and for both the human and also the livestock. So we can say around 18.4 million people are already in acute food insecurity and raising malnutrition in Somalia. And this can be seen like a lot of the displacement that's coming to the IDP target locations for Alight. And every day we are recording new displacements that's coming from the hard-to-reach areas.
Great. Thank you so much for describing that to us. It's helpful to hear what these terms actually mean. Abdinur, back to you. Alight has an integrated, multi-pronged approach to our response in the Horn of Africa. Can you tell us what Alight is doing?
Thank you, and Jocelyn, on that. And Alight, yes, has been providing life-saving interventions for the last 12 years in Somalia. And much of our program are integrated. We are providing health and nutrition, wash, protection, and livelihoods across most of the regions in Somalia where we work. We are supporting over 47 health facilities and nutrition sites across Somalia and Somaliland, providing basic health curative services as well as also nutrition services. Similarly, we provide wash services, includes water, access to water, either through rehabilitation and construction of water facilities, provision of emergency water tracking. For instance, in such emergency situations, at the moment, Alight is providing water tracking both in Lower Juba and as well as in Seoul region, where actually most of the villages people are fleeing and there's lack of water in those areas. In such a drought situation, actually the situation becomes severe, where people, both human and the animals, are being fed. They are being given water and food. The animals themselves are being given water. So we are providing emergency water tracking in such situations, emergency situations. Of course, we do provide as well both sanitation structures, that's latrines, and as well as also hygiene promotions in the IDP settlements, because we are expecting more people to come in that situation. Of course, if such sanitation facilities are not put in place, then definitely there will be outbreak of and waterborne or rather sanitation-based diseases. So to avert that, we do provide as well sanitation facilities and hygiene promotion services within those IDP camps. Similarly, we provide protection services, and my colleague Mohammed will talk much about that. But generally on GBV as well as also child protection. Of course, again, in such situations where we are talking about IDP camps and many people are going to those IDP sites, then of course we expect a lot of protection and risks especially for women and girls. So to really to avoid that and to prevent such risks for women and girls, we do have GBV and related activities as well as also child protection services for the young children. Similarly, we have livelihood, food security, what we call, and we do provide in-kind food distributions in such instances. Mohammed will also shortly talk about the Mandela Triangle, that we are trying to provide in-kind food distribution to those affected by the drought in the northern counties of Kenya, as well as also food distribution that we have done in Somaliland. We are also currently doing a limited way. We are providing some cash transfers to drought-affected populations in Kismayo. So basically, those are the key various activities that we're providing. Of course, at the moment, because of the drought, the drought committee, the famine relief committee, actually have zeroed into 4 major sectors. That is providing food, providing health services, providing water and shelter. So those are the key 4 areas that at the moment all the partners are really working on. And as Alight, we are really doing those services at the moment. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Dr. Ismahan, Aminur shared briefly about the health and nutrition support that are at the core of our response. And what does the process of therapeutic treatment for malnutrition look like? And what do you hear from moms and kids who have been going through this treatment?
Well, thank you, Jocelyn. And since the drought hits in Somalia, the process have really changed. And at the facility level, the process actually starts at the point of screening, where Alight Nutrition workers assesses the anthropometric measurement of the child, including the MWAC and weight for height screening. Since January, a lot of children came to the facilities who developed severe wasting, which is the most immediate and visible and life-threatening form of malnutrition. Alight team are really working very hard to provide the vital interventions as part of our response to the drought. We are giving these children therapeutic foods to treat acute malnutrition. We are also giving micronutrients to track all the divisions. We are also giving these children dewormings, and especially those we are transferring to the SC centers. There are some other cases who need emergency medical attentions, and they already developed complications so that we cannot remain in the OTB program. So we are transferring those children and we are giving them and dewormings. Giving like the prescriptions of the RUTF actually depends on like the weight of the child, and the severity of their illness. Routine treatment is given to each child, and supplementary drugs are prescribed depending on the needs identified during the treatment. Our service is not only limited in the OTBs. Other preventive activities are also undertaken, including educating mothers and encouraging families to adapt to the practical health and nutrition at home. We also trained a group of mothers on how to do MWAC screening while they're at home, so that the mother can assess her child at earlier stage before the child developed further complications. We are also encouraging, we are also educating mothers, particularly we are giving our consultations on IYCF counseling sessions, and also the breastfeeding practices, so that the child can receive appropriate complementary feeding at home. So that this also helps us to prevent to relapse, or maybe like the child to come back in the program for several times. So in generally, the program, especially for the OTB programs, like the longest period of time that the child can remain in the OTB program is maximum 2 months, and minimum for 1 month. So for us to be able to treat the child immediately and provide the immediate interventions, we need also to educate mothers. And all these families who have been affected by the droughts, they are coming of very far areas, and like most of them, they came from remote sites where before even the droughts were inaccessible because of the conflict issues, because of security issues related, like, as you know, part of Somalia are inaccessible in general. So we need to educate these mothers to tell them like how the child, like the type of malnutrition the child is suffering, and how she can be able to also mother to follow up her child to immediate recovery. Yeah. That's how general the process looks like of therapeutic feeding of the child.
Thank you. That's really helpful. What are you most concerned about right now in terms of health and nutrition?
Come again?
What are you most concerned about in terms of health and nutrition in the coming months as the situation gets worse? What are you most concerned about?
Yeah. Really, the droughts, the droughts is really increasing. The measles, the other preventable diseases that droughts has increased even to spread widely in general, especially the cholera cases and measles, because the children, they have, they're low immunized. They didn't get any vaccines, so it puts a lot of risk for those children to get infected and maybe to admit in the hospitals. Currently, the referral hospitals who are nearby the facilities we are operating, they are filled up with the children. They don't have any space. They are treating children like under temporary tents, which also gets like the situation was and was. So we are trying currently. Alight is launching like the mobile health, like the mobile clinics, whom are providing the integrated health and nutrition service to the population with no access to the health care in the areas of in the areas that the families are living, those who are affected by the droughts. So these 4 mobile teams are in addition to the already 47 fixed clinics and 5 mobile teams. So, and those mobile teams, they will be providing the same services as we serve others who are coming at the facility. We are also supporting the community health workers to visit the families at home to determine who needs an urgent treatment or urgent support to measure like the mid-up circumference, the MUAC, and to assess the level of malnutrition, whether they need to visit the stabilization center for medical attentions or whether they just like wants to give like RUTF at our facility levels.
No, it's so interesting to just recognize how interconnected all of these challenges are, right? That the drought can ultimately affect something like measles outbreaks because children are not getting the vaccinations they need because of that displacement and because of disrupted systems. So thank you for sharing that. Mohammed, can you tell us a little bit more about what our team is doing in regards to water, both for urgent, immediate needs, as well as longer term solutions?
Jocelyn, actually, as I have said before, the water is one big issue for this, both for human and for livestock. So Alight is currently doing emergency water tracking in all the locations in Somalia and Somaliland. And for this water tracking is also, this water tracking is supporting sterilization because people don't have anything to drink, and children are also dying for both hungry and thirst. So Alight is providing water tracking over 60 districts across Somalia and Somaliland. And some of the hit areas, especially in Jubaland and Somaliland, we have already exceeded the number of water tracking that was going on daily basis, as well as we are also doing construction of like trains. Majority of the hit areas, the people are coming to the IDBs, and to avoid open defecation, we are also doing massive construction of like trains in all of the locations, as well as we are also doing on WASH, we are also doing hygiene promotion and sensitization across all the areas, in order to promote, to prevent the waterborne diseases. And some of those people who are coming, still there are several cases of cholera that was really already investigated in some of the target locations. So Alight is really doing a lot to intervene and complement already the existing efforts from the government, as well as Alight is also solarizing some boreholes to increase the water production. As due to the drought, the water shield is also going down. Therefore, Alight is really doing a lot of effort to also solarize the existing boreholes, and in order to increase the water production for those areas, and also reduce the water costs for the depending host communities as well as displaced population. Maybe Abdul can also add more on the wash part.
Abdinor, did you have anything else to add on the wash?
No, precisely. I think Mohammed has really captured the key activities under WASH. I think just to recap again, at the moment, because of the emergencies that we're in, we are providing water tracking in most of the areas that we operate. That is in Lower Juba, as well as also in Seoul region in Somaliland. So we're providing water. Of course, at the basic level, at the families, I think are about 7.5 liters of water per person for the family. For the past 2 months, we have been providing, and we have some more funds at the moment in hand just to provide more of this water to those affected by the drought. And of course, for long-term as a long-term solutions, we have been, of course, constructing and rehabilitating strategic boreholes for the communities that we serve and we support. At the moment, actually, because of the long hours that some of these boreholes are really working, we're also providing some spare parts and the fast-moving equipments for these boreholes. To avoid excess use of fuel and all that, we also provide, as Mohammed has mentioned, we do solarization. We provide green energy for these boreholes, just to give the communities that alternative source of power for the boreholes. As I said again in my previous note, we are providing sanitation facilities, and that is the latrines for the IDP camps that are really hosting so many people now because of the drought, because of the displacement that's as a result of the drought. We are providing latrines for these IDP camps that we are supporting. In addition, we are giving hygiene promotion sessions just to give them a bit of how to do the normal hygiene and sanitation behaviors and practices, that so at least they can be able to avoid acute water diarrhea and those cholera that's already we actually reported cholera cases in some of the areas. For instance, in Mogadishu and Kismayo, there are cholera cases already that has been reported. So just to avoid the increase of these cases, we also providing hygiene promotion sessions just to provide more health messages to the people, at least for them to have healthy practices. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, when our first stop last week when we arrived in Somaliland was to visit the president of Somaliland, and his quote to us was that water was the most important priority from his perspective. And he was particularly interested in water catchment systems as a way to store water. Again, trucking, as you mentioned, is sort of the emergency response that gets people water today or tomorrow or next week. But then both the sort of restoration of boreholes that have broken down, as you both mentioned, as well as building these water catchment systems to allow people to be able and allow communities to trap water when the rains do come, is a really helpful strategy as well. Decca, we've talked about food and water and nutrition. What are some of the other ways that women and children in particular can be impacted in a crisis like this?
Yes, I think the main concern for any famine is the food and the water, but also there are other ways they are exposed when it comes to the safety. Let's say for Hargeisa, where we are at the capital of Somaliland, where you came, we have 17 IDP camps. And that's just, it's estimated a population of 1.5 million. It could be less, but within that small city, we have 17 IDP camps. And now they are going to create more internally displaced, camps because of the people coming from of the drought. So with these, camps, they have, it was built a tin, made out of tin houses, which is 3 meter by 3 meter. And, that's a very small space. And let's say a family of 7 and 8 are living in that. Now, with this comes, that's the house that was done for the 2015-2017 internally displaced people. And now we have this fudge of new IDPs, internally displaced people who are coming from all over Somali Peninsula. And each family is hosting another family or 2-3 family of 7 and 8 members, husband and wife and the kids. So what happens is the gender-based violence has increased tremendously. It has actually at the highest as it has ever been. And this is created because of the situation. These families are, members of, small boys and girls and men, all mixed together. What happens is the elder generation, let's say the grandma or the, mothers are slept inside and everybody else sleeps outside. Now this exposes to many, gender-based violence. The women we met in these camps and we had the conversation, all of them, all the 17 camps, we met with 7 of them. They talk rape that it happens on daily basis. Rape against women is becoming so frequent when they go to fetch water, whether it's in the city or in the outside nomad area. They said every time, because the man goes out to look for something for the family, and they usually travel and leave the wife and the kids, and the wife is left with the responsibility of fetching the water. So sometimes she has to, or getting a wood to make a fire. So what happens is she travels 2, 3, or 5 or 10 kilometers a day, and with that road comes with lots of danger. Male members within the camps area or from the city area, they are exposed and they are vulnerable in this situation. So the rape cases has actually gone the highest within these camps. And the second thing is not only with girls, but also with boys, because young boys of 10 are sometimes slept with older generation. It might not be talked openly, but because we cover with the whole rape, meaning, but also the boys are exposed, not just to the women. The other thing is the beating, the husband abuse. The women I talked to have said the abuse from the husband has also increased. They said because they can't have, the men are spending the day sitting idly and don't find jobs, they usually go and collect stones to sell to the construction company. And, in Somalis, we chew chat, the blunt that we chew. And sometimes when they don't get money to buy it, they come back home frustrated and they beat up the wife. So they said the beating has also been increased because of the situation they are in. And the other thing that is becoming very, the woman we talked to, Jocelyn, is they said FGM, the female genital mutilation is very common in the nomad area. And majority of these people has gone through. And now when they come, they said they go through, pregnancy and they're going through health issue. So it's not only the food, but the safety and the gender-based violence has also been increasing a lot. And one of the women said something that really broke my heart, because we were asking all the women, and she said, they all talk, oh, rape is very common, it happens on a daily basis, but we need shelter and education for our kids. And she said, rape is a normal thing. I don't know why you guys are complaining. You can understand from that point how much it's affecting the lives, that it's becoming normalization for these women to go through rape on a daily basis. So, and one other thing that is missing is, in Somaliland or in Somalia, we are going to have winter coming up soon. Now these people have mostly sleeping outside without tents or, without any shelter. And one of the concern is, with the cold coming, which goes up to minus 70 Fahrenheit, it's going to be extremely cold. So we have pneumonias, we have, dengue fever going on nowadays. So this is going to be also exposed to have the cold season, majority of them sleeping outside.
Thank you, Decca. Yeah, the stories that you shared were ones that I heard too, which were really devastating to hear about the increase in both domestic violence that was happening, just, severe stress of men and women in this economic situation, and that creating increase in violence, domestic violence, but then also the cases of gender-based violence and rape that's happening as a result of people not having homes and not being protected is really severe. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to switch over to some of the questions from our guests. Thank you for the great questions. The first one is from Dan Goodrich, and I'll direct this one to you, Abdi Noor, which is, what are the goals of Alight for providing short-term and long-term support?
Well, at the moment, I think we are really focused on the drought, and our goal now is how best we can be able to support and provide emergency support, emergency assistance to these drought-affected populations. So the issue is, and the support that we like to give is about the 4 key points, that areas that we talked about. That is food, providing emergency food, providing water, providing health, providing shelter for these for these drought-affected populations. So those are our short-term goals at the moment. Of course, for a long time, we are talking about resilience. We're talking about how best can be able to talk. Fight climate change. Of course, see how best we can be able to reduce the drought effects and kind of also provide some more resilience to the people. This can talk about providing, improving their livelihood standards, giving them skills, looking at giving TVET, through TVET and vocational skills training, we can be able to provide them with some skills so they can be able to become dependent on their lives. So I think these are the much of long-term goals at the moment. But of course, for now, I think every person and every particular partner, and whether it's the government or non-government organizations, we are really focused now at the moment is how best can we be able to provide emergency support to the drought-affected populations.
Thanks, Abdinur. I'll direct this one to you, Mohammed. This is from Igor. Is the situation equally difficult in the neighboring regions of Sanag or Beri, Nugal, Puntland? Where, how can you share with us, how widespread this situation is? Oh, you're on mute, Mohammed.
Maybe I can come in.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Abdinur.
Yeah, I think the drought is been affecting across Somalia and Somalia. So we are talking about all the regions, whether it is in Nugal, whether it is in Bari, Sanag, and in the other parts of the region. So I think the drought the situation is across all the regions in Somalia. Of course, the severity and the level is a bit maybe different in terms of severity, but again, the situation is the same in all the regions in Somalia.
Thank you. Decca, this one for you, which is, to what extent is the drought the result of climate change? To what extent is political instability impacting the region or other factors? Can you just, again, sort of, you touched on this before, but describe how all these things are coming together and affecting the region?
I think climate change is real, and it's affecting. We used to have a lot of rainfalls during the 3 seasons, but for the last 5 years, I've been here for 10 years. Every year after another year, it's decreasing. So the less rain we have, we seems to have less rain, and then the droughts also affecting the climate of the agriculture. Because of the sun, it's getting too hot in Hargeisa. In Somaliland, for example, it used to be very cold during the day. We never used to reach 35 or 37 degrees, but now it can reach up to 37 degrees. The highest we used to have was 25, 26 years ago. So that shows you the climate change is actually there and it's affecting. And Somaliland, Somalia, generally, southern Somalia is well known for agriculture. This side is Somaliland, and the ministerial majority are nomad people, so they depend on the rain. And with the climate change, it's becoming more, real that it's affecting everybody's life. And this is why the famine is coming back. It used to say we used to have famine in 30, every maybe 10 years we used to hear there's a famine. But now every 2 years you can hear, famine is becoming an effect in the Horn of Africa, especially. From political, Somalia, Somaliland is 2 different administrations. Somaliland is not recognized. The government's not recognized. They don't have international. The only thing they get is the international, humanitarian organizations and the UN. And nowadays they are even trying to support by providing the food. In Somalia, it's because of they have the means and the financial, but because of security, the accessibility to many areas are restricting for the government to go. So each area has their own different issues and restrictions that are restricting from political point of view. Socially, I think the people are well connected. Everyone is supporting the business, but because of the the market that was born in Hargeisa, the inflation going up in high, the COVID, the private sector used to be the pillar of the country, the whole Somalia. And nowadays, because it's affected economically worldwide, the private sector is also trying to do the best they can. So it's a combination of political situations where the government changes. We now have a new president in Somalia. We had the previous one in Somaliland. We have a new president, but we don't have the economic and the bow. So each section, each region have their own political issues. So yeah, it's a combination of so many things are becoming evident. And I hope something must be done as soon as possible, because this is going to continue. The way it looks like, it's not going to just stop now, but it will be coming back if decision or urgent decision support is not being carried out as soon as possible.
Thank you, Decca. Okay, I'm going to ask one last question to the group, and then I'm going to do a round of closing questions with all of you. Mohammed Kadir asks, and Abdi Noor, I'll direct this to you. Is there cooperation that we do with the government to find a solution to the recurrent famine and drought? Can you talk about how we're working with the government?
Yeah, I think we do work with the government, and all our services and supports that we provide to the people actually are directly through the government coordination. We do coordinate and collaborate with the government officials in all the areas that we work in, whether it is in Jubaland. Of course, we have the Jubaland state that we work closely with. If it is in Banadr, we have the Banadr administration, as well as also in Somaliland, where we work with the Somaliland government. So as a partner, we do provide all our services and work closely with the government authorities. In terms of coordination and talking about how best can be able to stop this recurrent famine, of course, negotiation is on, talks are on. I think recently the government of Somalia has also has participated in the climate talks in Egypt. So I believe the government will really come up with the platform so that they can be able to discuss further in this and how best we can be able to really come up with strategies to avert this recurrent drought.
Thank you so much. Okay, so my last question for all of you, Ismahan, we'll start with you, is what's your ask of this group that's listening here? We have colleagues from Alight from around the world, and we have many of our supporters and friends of Alight around the world. What is your ask? What can people do to support this challenge?
Thank you so much, Jocelyn. And as the crisis continues to escalate, the humanitarian need is expected to remain higher till next year. One thing I can say is that we need more actions, and the donor support is highly required at this time. And we need more donors to step in to enable the humanitarian agencies on the ground to rapidly scale up and prevent, like for us to be able to prevent more deaths. Because at this moment, a lot of women, like pregnant women and lactating mothers and even under 5 children, are continuing to be more vulnerable. So we are having like a limited medical, like pharmaceuticals, like the medical supplies, and our intervention actually limiting our intervention as a partner to be like to do our interventions like to drought affected populations. So I'm asking and speaking loudly to say that we need more actions we need a support, we need donors to step in this drought affected populations in Somalia or across Horn of Africa. Thank you.
Thank you. Abdi Noor, how about you? What's your ask of this group? Abdi Noor?
Thank you. And I think my message is looking back into the 2011 famine. What we have seen is out of the 250 plus lives that were lost, 50% of that actually lost before the official declaration of the famine. So I think we don't want a repeat of that history at the moment. And while, of course, the humanitarian partners, including Alight, are really providing life-saving support to those people, the crisis at hand and the issue at hand is really calls for an urgent scale-up of services. Partners require additional resources to really provide to continue with ongoing, response services. So what we, as my colleague Smana said, we are saying loudly or talking loudly, are requesting for additional resources to reach out to these drought-affected populations, provide or can continue with the current emergency life-saving interventions that we're providing. And after that, of course, we look into how best we can be able to provide more resilience and recovery programs to support and take back those who have really fled their homes and are currently in IDP camps, so they can be able to go back to homes and re-engineer their lives. Thank you.
Decca, how about you? What would you like to ask?
Right now, we really need all the Horn of Africa needs all the assistance it can get. They lost the livestock, but we will be losing humans as well if urgent assistance does not come. In the long term, I think we need to have, like Abdinur said, more resilience climates and pastoral and agriculture. But for now, people don't even have 1 meal a day. Majority, 70% of Somali Peninsula populations are on the verge of famine and they need urgent support. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you all so much for joining us today and for listening to this critically important discussion. Thank you so much to my incredible teammates who are working with families who are struggling with food insecurity in the Horn of Africa, and especially to those of you who joined me today, Decca, Mohammed, Ismahan, Abdi Noor. As all of them just shared, the time to act is now. If you are able to support Alight's 6-country response, please make a donation online. We are actually starting today a flash appeal, which is for 150 families who have recently arrived in the Degale Displaced Persons Camp, which is one of the places that I visited last week, where you heard the stories that I shared of the women who had recently arrived. This support that we're raising over the next 24 hours will provide these families with a welcome kit to get settled in after their long journey. This will include sleeping mats for the whole family, plastic sheeting to put up a tent, blankets for the women and the men and the children, kitchen sets, soaps and sanitary pads, and a supply of clean water. This, as Decca mentioned, it's getting cold. The evenings were rainy in Hargeisa when we were there. And so these welcome kits will allow people to be able to sleep safely and comfortably once they arrive in the camp after their long journeys. These welcome kits are $189 per family, so we are looking to raise a total of $28,275 for the welcome kits for 150 families in the next 24 hours. And so if you are able to provide support, please go online and do so. Please spread the word to friends, to family using social media. Please follow Alight social media and our mailing list if you aren't already. If you have questions after today's call, please feel free to send me a note. My email is on the screen, jocelynw@wearealight.org. Thank you all again so much for being with us today. Have a wonderful day, and we look forward to seeing you all online or another briefing call or in person at an event in the future. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jocelyn.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Thank you, Somalia team.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, all.
Thank you, Jocelyn.
Have a good day ahead. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.